The man who shuffled into the grocery store looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. His clothes were worn, his face etched with lines of hardship, and his hair was a tangled mess. He moved slowly, his eyes scanning the aisles, not for himself, but with a quiet, searching gaze. He wasn't the kind of customer that usually drew attention, but tonight, something was different. A young boy, no older than 7, was standing near the bakery section, his eyes wide and fixed on a small, frosted cupcake. His stomach rumbled loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. His mother stood a few feet away, her face a mask of worrying, as she counted the few coins in her hand, shaking her head subtly. She gently tried to pull her son away, but his little feet were planted firmly on the ground, his gaze locked on the sweet treat he so desperately wanted. The homeless man watched this quiet, heartbreaking scene unfold. He saw the boy's longing and the mother's quiet despair. Without a second thought, he walked over to the bakery display. He pointed to the exact cupcake the boy was staring at, his voice a low, raspy whisper. "I'll take that one, please," he said to the baker. He then turned to the boy and offered a small, hesitant smile. "This is for you," he said, handing the cupcake to the wide-eyed child. The boy's face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at his mom for approval, and when she nodded, tears welling in her eyes, he carefully took the cupcake. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. The mother looked at the homeless man, her gratitude overflowing. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means," the man just nodded, a flicker of warmth in his tired eyes. He then made his way to the checkout counter where a young cashier named Clara was working. He placed a can of soup and a loaf of day-old bread on the conveyor belt. Clara rang up the items. "That'll be $3.42, she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. She'd seen him in the neighborhood before, always keeping to himself, never causing any trouble. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn pouch. He carefully tipped it over, and a cascade of coins, pennies, nickels, dimes spilled onto the counter. He began to count them out slowly, his fingers fumbling with the small change. Clara waited patiently, a wave of sympathy washing over her. As he pushed the last few pennies forward, his elbow knocked a tattered wallet off the counter. It fell open on the floor, its contents scattering. Clara instinctively bent down to help him pick everything up. A faded photograph of a young woman, a crumpled bus ticket, and a single, official-looking ID card. As she picked up the ID, her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the name printed in bold letters. Sergeant Michael Vance. Her heart began to pound in her chest. Vance. The name echoed in her memory, a name she had heard countless times from her father, a retired Army colonel. He often spoke of his time in the service, and one story, in particular, stood out, the story of a hero who had saved his entire unit. "There was this young sergeant," her father would say, his voice full of reverence. "Michael Vance. We were pinned down, completely surrounded. It was a suicide mission, and we all knew it. But Vance, he was different. He single-handedly created a diversion, drawing enemy fire so the rest of us could get to safety. He saved every single one of us that day." Her father's story always ended on a somber note. "We all made it back, except for him. He was listed as missing in action, presumed dead. We never saw Michael Vance again. I owe my life to that man." Clara looked from the ID card to the man standing in front of her. The face in the photo was younger, clean-shaven, and full of life, but the eyes were the same. The same kind, determined eyes that now looked so tired and lost. "Sergeant Vance," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man froze. He slowly looked up, his eyes widening in shock. No one had called him that name in years. It was a name he had tried to bury, a ghost from a life he had left behind. How do you know that name?" he asked, his voice trembling. "My father," Clara explained, her own voice shaking with emotion. "He's Colonel Anderson. You served with him. You saved his life." Tears welled up in Michael's eyes as the memories came flooding back. The explosion, the chaos, the long, painful journey home only to find a world that no longer made sense. He had suffered from severe PTSD, unable to reconnect with society, and eventually ended up on the streets, a ghost of his former self. Clara quickly paid for his groceries out of her own pocket. "Please," she said, her hands shaking as she handed him the bag. "Wait here. Just for a minute." She quickly called her father, her words tumbling out in a rush of excitement and disbelief. "Dad, you're not going to believe this. I found him. I found Sergeant Vance." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a choked sob. Within 20 minutes, Colonel Anderson, now an elderly man who walked with a cane, burst into the grocery store. He saw Michael standing hesitantly by the door, and for a moment, the two old soldiers just stared at each other across the years. "Vance, is it really you?" the colonel asked, his voice thick with emotion. Michael could only nod, tears streaming down his face. The colonel closed the distance between them and wrapped his arms around the man who had saved his life. "Welcome home, soldier," he said, his voice breaking. "It's time to come home." That night, Michael Vance didn't sleep on a cold park bench. He slept in a warm bed in the Andersons' guest room. It was the beginning of a new chapter. With the help of the colonel and Clara, he began to get the support he needed. He started therapy for his PTSD and slowly began to piece his life back together. The man who had once paid for a cupcake with his last few coins had given a family a gift they could never repay, the return of their hero. And in return, they gave him something he thought he had lost forever: a home, a family, and a second chance at life. This incredible story just goes to show that heroes are all around us, and sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change a life in the most unexpected way. Thanks for watching, and if you were touched by this story, please like and subscribe for more.